Okay, I'll start by trying to share a screen as usual. Is that looking promising?
Yeah, that's
all good.
Good. So the topic today is what minor methods do we ring next? And I do stress minor methods. Quite often plain bob, whether doubles or minor, might well be your first method, and then you might well go on to grand ser. You might be wanting to ring Stedman, but I'm specifically looking at minor methods. And I'm also mindful of the fact that we have talked in previous chats about place spells. So as it says on the screen, I'm going to look at two minor methods that very definitely are ones that you might well put next on your list, your pathway, if you like, once you've mastered plain bob minor. And those two methods, as Claire said, are St. Clement's and double Oxford. But also I'm mindful of the fact that we have been considering place spells, so I'll make a mention of them on the way through, and that's particularly influenced my choice of double Oxford. St. Clement's is a very popular method, double Oxford slightly less so. So we mentioned in the previous talk that generally speaking, you're not told about place spells for good reason when you learn your first method, which is probably plain bob, first minor method. But by the time you get to ringing surprise, quite a lot further on, you definitely have met them. So what is it about plain bob on the one hand and a surprise method, probably Cambridge on the other hand, that is the difference? And I think the point is that plain bob minor can definitely be rung by rules. Effectively, you're plain hunting the whole time. You learnt plain hunting first, plain bob minor, you plain hunt all the time with a few funny bits thrown in. Because of that, it really isn't. It's a sort of continuous circle. You just keep on ringing. There's not a great deal of advantage in knowing what place spell you are. That contrasts with surprise minor, which is a complicated blue line for all of them. And you probably therefore do just, particularly with your first one, just have to sit down and learn it. It's hard work. And unless you've got a really good memory, I certainly haven't, you probably learn one lead at a time, one place spell's work at a time. And it definitely does help to know what place spell you are. For one thing, if you get lost, as we said, the conductor may tell you your fourth place spell. So it definitely does help by then, but not at the beginning. That's a slightly oversimplistic analysis because I do want to stress there's no absolutely cut and dried division between methods that you ring by rules, like plain bob, or the ones where you learn the blue line. It's a sort of continuous variation between the two, but certainly quite a few of the simple methods are rung mostly by rules. And it's in those by rules methods that knowing your place spell is less helpful. And including in those, I would definitely say plain bob, which we've discussed, not necessarily just minor on any number. You're just plain hunting with a bit of work here and there. No need to know what place spell you are. And I think St. Clement's, that I think many of you have rung and we'll be looking at today, also comes into that category. But I don't want to suggest that it's only simple methods that are the ones that you can ring by rules. Some of you may have come across little bob or they've been mentioned, I know, in some of the talks. And double Norwich, certainly, that's a major method, which a lot of really quite good ringers can't ring. So it's definitely not necessarily simple. It's very interesting and worthwhile, but it's also one that people, by and large, ring more by rules than by learning a blue line and knowing which place spell they are. In contrast with that, it really does help to know your place spell in anything where the line is more complicated, which in particular means surprise methods. And as we saw, touches are much easier to understand if you know what place spell you are. So if you make the bob, if it's a fourth place bob in plain bob or Cambridge, it doesn't really matter. If you make the bob, two blows in fourths, what do you do after that? Your fourth place spell. And if you know what fourth place spell does, you just ring it. Makes it much easier. Also splicing, which is where the conductor changes the method. That really keeps you on your toes. I really like ringing splice stuff. It nearly always finishes by crashing and everybody bursts out laughing, which is a very good sign. But the point about those, all those items in blue above there, it's already rather advanced stuff. So a question that I want to ask in passing today in looking at what methods we might look at is there a fairly simple minor method that is not rung by rules? So it's probably one where place spells could well be introduced. And my answer is yes. I think double Oxford minor really does do the trick there, and we'll see why as we go through. But to start off with, we're going to look at St. Clement's minor, I hope quite a few have come across it already. There's its blue line. If you haven't come across it already, well, I'll explain it a bit. You're not meant to sort of look at that and think, oh yes, of course I know that. But let's have a look at it. Firstly, there is a rule. Not quite as simple as plain bob. In plain bob, you spend most of your time plain hunting. Here, you'll also see there's a lot of plain hunting. If we look here, thirds place bell, you plain hunt out to the back and then back to the, oh, not to the front, only to thirds place. And that is the general rule. A lot of the time you're plain hunting from the back, down to thirds place, out to the back, down to thirds place. With the complication that we're entirely used to from plain bob, that you put in a dodge at the lead end. So here we go, thirds, out to the back to thirds, out to the back, treble's leading, do a dodge, 5-6 up. Out to the back to thirds, out to the back, and by this time the treble's leading again, and we put in a dodge, 5-6 down this time. Carrying on, down to thirds, out to the back, and coming back down again. So that's the concept of plain hunting, but stopping short at thirds. And for two other leads, you do something different. And what you do is called front work, for the fairly obvious reason that during those two leads, you spend most of your time stuck at the front. So let's look about this rule about hunting between thirds place and the back. As is quite often true, the more bells you have, the harder it is to ring, just because there are more bells to look around, it's harder to hear a bell, the whole thing goes a bit quicker. But if we're not ringing, but just looking at a blue line, often it's easier to see the pattern. So there is the blue line for a whole plain course of St. Clement's Major. And I think it's much clearer from that than it was from the previous diagram that a lot of the time you're hunting between thirds and the back with dodges at the lead end, which is a familiar concept from plain bob. And there's a bit in the middle, two leads, where you're doing front work and you're stuck at the front. And then we go back to the other bit. So if we started here, all this time here, a lot of it, we're hunting between thirds and the back with dodges in 5, 6, and 7, 8 at the lead ends, and we have two leads of front work. I think that diagram makes it a lot clearer that that's what the rule is. What about what do you do in the two front works leads? Well, there's a rule if you want to think of it that way there too. Basically, you're stuck at the front, and that says it all. So once you've done your 3-4 dodge at the lead end, you're stuck at the front and you just hover around dodging for ages and ages. Then eventually you do a lead seconds lead, which we're familiar with from plain bob, so that's not too tricky to understand. And then you're back to the dodging again before you leave. Exactly how many dodges you do, you can either learn, it happens to be 3 in minor and 5 in major, or some people prefer to think, well, you keep dodging here until the treble arrives. You can't dodge with the treble, so that's when you stop dodging. Some people prefer to think of it that way. But the point is, there's one rule for all these leads and a different rule for the two leads of front work, which is essentially lots of dodging at the front. Something else that's actually quite handy, as to deciding where you do the dodges at the lead end, we mentioned that in an earlier talk too, you can be guided by remembering just what order they come in, but you can also look or listen for the treble lead. That's when you do these dodges in 3, 4, or 5, 6. Or if you're someone who likes to work it out by where you cross the treble, the rules are exactly the same for plain bob. Here we're leading, making seconds, because we've crossed the treble. If the treble takes you off the lead, you make seconds. If on the other hand, seconds place work, you leave the lead and you cross the treble as you go from 2 to 3, then you do a dodge pretty immediately. You do a 3-4 up dodge. If you're familiar with that, the good news is it works exactly the same way here as it does in plain bob. If you're not familiar with it, that's fine. All of this, I think, is why St. Clement's is a very good next minor method. It's largely by rules, but it's quite a bit different from plain bob, and it's a very good one to do next. I really, though, want to look at double Oxford, because I think that's new to nearly all of you. Why double Oxford? Several reasons. Though it's not that easy a method, it does follow on quite well, as we'll see from St. Clement's. It's also a double method. I'll explain what that means if you don't know in a minute. That makes it a lot easier. Notice a double method, not a doubles method. Doubles, as you know, means 5 bells. This is a different word. It's a double method. And also, as I said at the beginning, I think it's a very good place to start talking. If you're a teacher or a ringing master, it's a very good time to start talking to your students about place spells. So why does it follow on nicely from St. Clement's? Well, like St. Clement's, 2 of the leads are front work. And the front work is exactly the same as St. Clement's, so we know it already. So for example, if you're starting at bell number 2, just like in St. Clement's, you do the full lead. If you were going all the way through, you'd have just done lead, seconds, lead. You finish your front work with the 3 dodges. That's exactly the same as St. Clement's. Come out, and at the lead end, it's a 3-4 up dodge. So that, at least, is exactly the same as St. Clement's. What's more, there are actually 2 leads of front work. That's one of them. The other one is also the same. As you arrive at the front work, you've just done a dodge here, and just like St. Clement's, you come down to the front, you do a triple dodge, lead, seconds, lead, and you finish off your front work. So 2 of the leads we know already from St. Clement's. If you're new to St. Clement's, this won't look that easy, but if you've rung St. Clement's, that would think, okay, yeah, I can do that. And that makes it easy to start. The other point I mentioned is that it's a double method. Now, what a double method means is that it's sort of the same as itself inside out. You can reflect it, or you can ring it standing on your head or something like that if you feel that you want to put it that way. Anything you do at the front, we also do at the back, sort of inside out, upside down, reflected. For example, here, as we've seen, we come down to the front, do a triple dodge, lead, seconds, lead, a triple dodge, and leave the front. How would that look if we reflected it and did it inside out? Well, instead of coming down to the front, we'd be going out to the back. We'd do a triple dodge at the back, not at the front. Leads, seconds, lead would become, when we reflect it, lie at the back, fifths, lie. And this making fifths, here it's seconds over the treble. If we reflect it, it'll be fifths under the treble. And then having done that, we're going to do our other triple dodge at the back, not the front, and then leave the back. Now, I'm not suggesting that, oh, yes, that's easy, I can immediately ring it, I see that, but it does mean that in terms of stuff we have to learn, it's not too bad. So let's just go through that again. Here, we're starting the front work by coming down, just like St. Clement's, to the front, triple dodge, lead, seconds, lead, triple dodge, and leave the front. Here, we're arriving at the back, triple dodge, lead, seconds, lead, but inside out. So it's not leading at the front, it's lying at the back. It's not seconds place, it's seconds from the back, if you like, and it's under the treble. But it's the reflection of lead, seconds, lead, triple dodge, and we leave the back. So, as I say, I'm not suggesting you can instantly, suddenly get into a tower and start ringing that, but it sort of follows on a bit. So we've not got too much left to do. In fact, that's 80% of the work, but if we know St. Clement's, we know it already. I'll just make one other comment before we fill in the remaining gap. In this method, it's a bit different from plain blob. Plain blob, you move from the front to the back, to the front, to the back quite a few times. Here, in a plain course, you come down to the front and you stay there quite a long time. Then you go out to the middle, and we've got a bit of a gap to fill in, but eventually you get to the back and you stay at the back for a long time. So in a whole plain course, you just go to the back once, stay there, come back to the front once and stay there. You only go front to back once in a whole plain course. So you've got to fill in the bits in the middle, and it probably won't surprise you to know, given that bells get stuck at the front and the back for ages, that we're going to get stuck in the middle. There are bells already occupied at the front and the back, so it won't come as a surprise probably to know that we get stuck in the middle. So here we've come out from the front, we've done our 3-4 dodge, we're going to hang around in third and fourth place in this gap and in that one. And there is what it is. You've got to learn it, certainly. But as you leave the front work with a dodge, you hang around, filling in that gap that we had by making places, another dodge, and that's when you head out to the back. And I'm no sure the same thing will happen a bit later on. Where was that other gap? Here we've done our back work, triple dodge, lie, fifths, lie in the middle of the back work, another triple dodge. Here we're coming out of our back work. We do a dodge, places, places, dodge. Exactly what we did here. Dodge, places, places, dodge. So every time you're in the middle, you hang around a bit. You arrive at the middle with a dodge, you do places, places, another dodge, and keep going. I'll make the point that I'll mention this again later on in this talk. It's quite often useful not just to know the blue line, but to have a little pointer. Where do you meet somebody? And a useful pointer is that in these particular sort of places, I think they're called court places, I'm not sure. As you make the places, the treble goes through the middle. So here, leaving the front, 4, 3, dodge. Fourths, thirds, and in moving from fourths to thirds, the treble will go through me. Fourths over the treble, third under the treble. And I think we'll find here we go into back work, back work, back work, back work. Where are we leaving the back? Here we go, leaving the back, we come up, dodge, places, places. And those two places, the treble again goes through. It's just a little signpost. So this definitely is a method that we have to remember how to ring. We sort of learn the blue line, but there isn't actually too much to remember. We have to remember the front work, but it's exactly the same as St. Clement's. And it gets repeated as back work, which is the same inside out. So we don't really have to remember that either. And there's the middle work, which we've just explained. When you leave the front, you leave with a dodge as the treble leads. You do places and another dodge as a sort of stepping stone in the middle before you keep going. And the same the other way around. So I'm not suggesting that that's enough that you can immediately go out and ring it, but it's a good guide as to how it works. I did also say that this is a good time to introduce play spells. Again, we're running at a very rapid pace here. You'd want to ring St. Clement's and get used to it and do touches of that, and then ring a plain course or two of double Oxford, hopefully starting in various different bells. But in due course, the time will come when you want to do a touch of double Oxford. So here's a question. I'll deliberately choose the most difficult one. There's a bob, and it just so happens that when you get there, your work is to run out. So you've been coming along here, you've arrived at front work, you've done your triple dodge, you're going to go leads, seconds, bob. Oh, I won't make seconds. Just like in plain bob, if there's a bob, lead, but I'll run out. What on earth do you do next? What you do next is actually very weird, but a good way to work it out is play spells. If you run out 2 to 3 because of a bob, you're going to become thirds play spell. So you become thirds play spell. What does thirds play spell do? It makes fourths, thirds, dodge, and heads out to the back. Now, if you'd never heard of play spells, and I said, well, in this funny new method, double Oxford, how do bobs work? Well, just like plain bob, you run in, run out, make the bob. Okay, which one should we do? Let's run out. Oh, well, I go from 2 to 3 in running out. I don't know, I probably keep going to the back, do I? No, you do this weird thing that having run out, you do fourths, thirds, another dodge, and go out to the back. And as an isolated thing to learn, that's totally weird. How do we make it easy? We think of play spells. If there's a bob, and I was going to make seconds, just like in plain bob and lots of other methods, I run out. So at the end of the lead end, I'm in thirds position, and I know, because I've rung this method, I know how thirds position starts. It makes fourths, third, dodge, which otherwise would seem totally weird. So that's why I think play spells really do make sense for this method. Last question for today, and we're going to come back to this quite a bit later, about half an hour later probably. So don't think the last means we're about to finish. A lot of methods it's very useful to have signposts. It's nice to get somewhere and think, oh, I'm expecting to meet you there. Are you there? Yes, hello, good. I'm dodging with you. That's great. This method is slightly characterized by the fact that you do lots of triple dodges. In your front work, you do triple dodges on the way in, and again after making seconds, and you do them again at the back. So a lot of the time is spent doing a triple dodge. Who do you do them with? Because if you know who you're going to meet there, it really makes it much easier. It's very reassuring. So if we look at a particular bell, the 2, it's dodging with the 4 here. Then it goes through the middle, it gets to the back, and it's dodging with a 3 at the back here. Diddly-dum, lie, fifths, lie, another triple dodge. Oh, it's the 4 again. 4 again here, middle work down to the front, and here we're dodging with a 3. So by spending quite a lot of time and looking at the diagram there, the answer is the 2 does its triple dodges with the 3 and the 4. And we could have done that for all the bells. With the 4, it happens to be the 2 and the 6 if we bothered to read through the numbers there in some detail. It'll take us quite a bit of time. We could do that for every single bell. And that's useful information if we can find a way whereby it's obvious that those are the 2 bells. If we've got to remember which 2 bells it is, it's a bit of a pain. But if we were suddenly told a better answer that works for all bells, then that would be useful. And there is a better answer to this question. Which bells do you do your triple dodges with at both the front and the back? And the answer is your course bells. Now the question is, have you heard of course bells? Do you know what they are? Are you confident about them? And another term is coursing order. And that's what we're going to spend the rest of today looking at. Let me first of all get the nomenclature sorted out. Course bells implies there are 2 of them. And one of them is called a before bell, one of them is called an after bell. That shouldn't come as a surprise. If I just backstep a bit, we noticed that, for example, the 2 dodges with the 3 and the 4. There are 2 bells. The 4 dodges with the 2 and the 6. So there's a pair of bells that you dodge with. So going through here, course bells, there are 2 of them. They're the 2 bells you dodge with. One of them's called your before bell, one of them's called your after bell. Collectively, they're called your course bells. And so often we get our words slightly muddled up. Quite often people talk about just one of the course bells and say your course bell, in which case they mean your before bell. So what on earth are all these things about? Okay. Coursing order is involved in this as well. And that's a rather more advanced thing. Mostly it's used in advanced stuff like conducting. But we are going to look at it a little bit to start with to see where this whole idea of course bells and coursing order comes from. Because coursing order leads on to the concept of course bells, and that isn't advanced stuff. It is really, really useful in ringing. It provides lots of signposts. So where does this idea come from? Well, let me say at the beginning that this applies to any number of bells, but I'm going to concentrate on 6 because we're talking at minor today. The first thing you do on 6 bells probably is plain hunt. In plain hunt on 6 bells, plain hunting, we know how to do that, the bells lead in a fixed order. Immediately the 2 leads, then the 4, then the 6, then the 5, then the 3, then we're back to the 1, and if we kept on going, 2, 4, 6, 5, 3, 1, 2, 4, 6, 5, 3, 1. The bells lead in that order. Let's pick a particular bell. I've chosen the 5 for no particular reason. If you're the 5, the 6 here leads before you. It's called your before bell, one of your course bells, and the 3 leads after you. It's called your after bell. So the 5's course bells are the 6 and the 3. They're called your before bell and your after bell. Why? Because in plain hunting, the 6 leads before the 5 and the 3 leads after it. And that would apply. There's no particular reason for choosing the 5. I could have chosen any bell. Let's go straight on to look at plain bob, because that's actually more useful. So in plain bob, I've had to squash the diagram around a bit. We said that in plain hunting, the 6 leads before you and the 3 leads after you if you're the 5. Is that still true? Let's have a look. Here we go. Here's the 5. Well, we start off playing hunting, so it's no great surprise that the 6 does indeed lead before us and the 3 leads after us. Down here again, you'll see here's the 5 coming up to a lead. Yeah, the 6 leads before you, it's your before bell, and the 3 leads after you. Now, of course, in a method, the treble's a bit different now. The treble is playing hunting while all the other bells are doing work. So we'll have to knock the treble out of the way for a minute. And we'll also find that it sometimes gets in the way. There's one lead in general. Sure enough, yes, from the 5's point of view, the 6 leads before you and the 3 leads after you. But sometimes the treble gets in the way. Here, we still have the 6 leading before us, but then the treble comes down. We make seconds, we lead again, and then we're back to the norm in that the 3 is going to lead after us. So does the 6 always lead before and the 3 always lead after the 5? Well, yes, but sometimes we have a sort of double go and the treble leads in the way. But other than that, yes, the same bell always leads before us and after us. So we do see the same pattern. And it's not just a pattern to observe and think, oh yeah, that's nice. It really is useful. Notice that if you can think back to when you were just struggling with playing hunting or with playing bob, it's really helpful when you're starting, when you're leading, to know who's going to follow you. You've probably seen in the tower, someone gets down to the lead, they get that right and think, I've got to hold up, oh, panic, who am I holding up after? And they look around all over the place. If you know which bell it's going to be, it is really helpful. So that is helpful. So it's very helpful to know who leads after you, but also who leads before you, because not merely does it lead before you, but it's showing you the way down to the lead. As you hunt down, you're always 2 blows after your before bell, of course, because it's going to get down and lead, and as it leads, you catch up and you lead after it. And again, that's not just a bit of theoretically useful knowledge, it is really useful in ringing. One of my bits of advice if you're starting ringing is, who's the best member of the band? Try and get them as your before bell. Because generally speaking, hunting up, people find a bit easier. Hunting down is harder. And if you get stuck hunting down, if you know who your before bell is and you keep 2 blows behind it, you'll be in the right place. Of course, if that bell gets lost, you're stuffed. But if it's the best ringer in the band, you know they're not going to get lost, so you can follow them all the way down. So this idea of course bells isn't just a sort of theoretical nice idea, it's really practical in the tower. Your before bell is the one that in plain bob you follow on the way down and you take it off the lead. That's very useful if you get in a bit of a muddle and aren't quite sure where you are. So you don't have to worry about which bell you're immediately following, which is different bells. Just stay 2 bells behind your course bell, your before bell, as it comes down before you. And as we said earlier, it's very good to know who takes you off the lead, because you so often see in towers with beginners people leading, and it's very important to get as you move into second, to get the bell up really into second's place. It really helps to know who that is. So if you're having to look around all over the place, not so good. If you know who it is, that's useful. So really useful stuff. And we'll find that it's not just those things I've listed there. It doesn't actually show up on the diagram, but it is true that you'll also find that you have dodges at the back in plain bob. You dodge in 5-6 up and 5-6 down, and it's useful to know that the bells you meet there are your course bells. This particular diagram stops short of that. We've got our 3-4 down dodge. The next one would be 5-6 down. It doesn't show on the diagram, but it would be one of my course bells that I dodge with, and that's a useful signpost as well. Now, we were looking at the 5, but more generally, I could have looked at any bell, and we'll find that every single bell has a before bell and an after bell. It's 2 course bells, and it's probably best shown as a circle like this. The 5, 6 is your before bell, 3 is your after bell. If I list it for every single bell and do what I've just done and find my before bell and after bell for all of them, we get this circle. So 4, who's your before bell? The 2. who's your after bell, the 6. And this diagram shows for everybody who our course bells are. And this order, 5, 3, 2, 4, 6, 5, 3, 2, 4, 6, is called our coursing order. Mostly that won't concern us when we're ringing. We're more interested in our before and after bells, but it can be written that way, and that's useful. And although it's best thought of a circle because it doesn't really have a beginning and end, quite often, because we're human beings and we tend to write in straight lines, we write them in a straight line, 5, 3, 2, 4, 6. And the usual convention for no particular, well, there is a reason, but no particular reason that's relevant to us at the moment, you quite often put the tenor at the back. So 5, 3, 2, 4, 6 is the coursing order. And that tells us for each bell who our before bell and after bell is. For the 2, it's the 3 and the 4. Good. Crucial thing about this is that the coursing order throughout a plain course stays the same. Again, that's really useful if you're thinking of ringing with complete beginners when they start ringing plain bob. They may realize if we're the 5, as we saw, the 3 is the bell that takes you off the lead to start with, but it's the same every time. You'll often see them looking around. Oh, it was the 3 last time. Who's it going to be this time? Oh, it's the 3 again. What a surprise. But your before bell and your after bell stay the same throughout a plain course, but they change at a bob or a single. So remember, if you are coming to rely a bit on course bells, that when the conductor calls a bob or a single, some of them will change. They may well change. Now, I should immediately say here, in red, that this is something that conductors get very excited about. It's beyond us at the moment, but conductors actually keep track of the coursing order in their head, and they know exactly how a call, not just that it changes the coursing order, they know exactly how it changes it, and that enables them to help keep people right and all sorts of advanced stuff like that. But I just mentioned that it's well beyond what we're doing at the moment. All we need to know is your before and after bell stay the same until there's a bob or a single, then maybe they'll change, but then again they'll stay in the change state until there's another bob or single, and then they may change again. Really interesting for conductors, less so for us. Okay, now we're going to move on a bit. And this is what I think is really amazing. If you look at the diagram, I haven't said the coursing order for plain bob minor. I've just said the coursing order for 6 bells. And we'll find that the vast majority of methods have exactly the same coursing order. That's really what makes it so powerful. I've mentioned why knowing your course bells is useful in plain bob, but they're useful in every method. And just picking one purely at random, of course, double Oxford is what we've been looking at today. And we'll see in a minute why this concept is useful in double Oxford. And it's not just those, it's lots and lots and lots of minor methods. As with everything, there's the occasional exception, but all the methods you'll ring for a very long time, this will be true of. Not something like Stedman, but all the minor methods, with very few exceptions, have the same coursing order. But when we define coursing order, we did it by looking at plain hunting and plain bob, and your before bell led before you. It was the order of leads. That is part of the concept that goes out of the window when we start looking at other methods. So it's no longer the case that bells necessarily lead in the coursing order. So you're probably saying, well, why have you been waffling on about this? What's the point of learning a coursing order if the bells don't lead in it anymore? And that's a very good question. But we do find out, and this is always a bit of a surprise to me, I've never quite fully come to terms with this, but it is the case that knowing your course bells really is always very useful, even if the original definition, which is the order in which they lead in plain bob, no longer applies. I better give an example of that, because you won't believe me. I said earlier that we had the last question today. It was about 3 hours ago, but we're coming back to it, and it really is the last question. So we're coming to the end shortly. The question, if you can cast your mind back that far, was in double Oxford, which is a new method, it's brand new to us, we want to get some clues. which bells do you do your triple dodges with at the front and the back? And that's an interesting question. It's not just an intellectual question that I'm asking to be awkward. When you get to the front and the back, as I said earlier, it's really handy to know who you're going to dodge with and find that they're there. It reassures you, yes, I'm in the right place, good. And if you remember, we looked at the 2, it dodges with the 3 and the 4, and the 4, it dodges with the 2 and the 6, and we wondered if you had to learn that or if there was some sort of quicker way of doing it, and sure enough there is. Everybody dodges with their core spells. 2, who are your core spells? 3 and 4, in all methods. So this is not something you learn specially for playing Bob or Double Oxford. It's a universal truth, so you know it. 4 dodges with the 2 and the 6 because they're its core spells. So once you've got the concept of core spells, it is applicable very, very widely. Exactly how the core spells are useful in a given method, yes, it does vary from method to method, but they're always useful. So if I can summarize about methods universally, this is the last slide. I wouldn't quite say for all methods because someone will say, well, there is the occasional exception, but basically for all methods, we've been looking at minor methods, they have a coursing order and it's this, 5, 3, 2, 4, 6. And each bell, the 4 for example, has 2 core spells, the 6 and the 2. One is its before bell, the other is its after bell. The name before bell and after bell may well come from playing Bob, where the before bell leads before you and the after bell leads after you. That doesn't carry across to more advanced methods. But if you're learning some weirdo new method, what have you got to do? Well, firstly, of course, any new method, you've got to learn what the method is. What's its blue line or what's the rule you ring it by? Of course, you've got to do that. When you actually get to ring it in the tower, though, you find, or I'm being a bit rude, I find, let's put it that way, I may well know the blue line or the rule, but occasionally I go wrong. In fact, quite often, I fall off the blue line, I get lost. How do I get back again? If you're lucky enough to have a really first-rate conductor, you get a bit lazy. The conductor just says, oh, David, you're at the back now, you're coming up to a dodge, yep, okay, good. And they do your thinking for you because they're so clever, they know what everyone's doing. If you don't have that luxury, you've got to find a way to get back onto the straight and narrow. Where should you be? You've got lost. So what signposts are there when you're actually ringing that will help you so that even though you actually know what the blue line is or you know what the rule is, you've gone a bit wrong, you've got a bit muddled. And I would say the first one of those is, where's the treble? How do you interact with the treble? Now, this is a universal truth, but just looking at some of the methods we've looked at today, in St. Clement's, you do your dodges when the treble's leading. When you're leading, the treble takes you off the lead, you make seconds. If you'd forgotten that, that helps. And I think I mentioned that those funny places you do, you know, you're at the front for a long time. Now it's going on to Double Oxford. You're at the front for a long time, then you're in the middle, and you do dodge, place, place, dodge. The treble goes through the middle of that. Now, that's not part of the blue line. It's a bit of an extra. But if you happen to know that about the method, it's really reassuring that when you get to that bit, yes, I can see the treble going through. Thank you. I know where I am. And the other universal source of signposts is, how do you interact with your core spells? I'm of the opinion that they're very, very useful in playing Bob because they do so much. Your before bell, you follow it down to the lead. So if you get a bit muddled up, just stay 2 blows behind your before bell. Then you lead, and it's your after bell that takes you off the lead. And again, at that level of ringing, when you're finding that a bit difficult, who takes you off the lead is a really crucial bit of information. But also, just looking at Double Oxford, because that's the other new method for today, why does it help to know your core spells? Because a lot of Double Oxford is hanging around in the same place and doing a triple dodge, both at the front and at the back. Who do you do it with? Your core spells. So if you get to there, you don't have to look around wildly and think, who am I dodging with? It's going to be one or other of your core spells, and that is a very, very useful signpost. Yes, certainly it's true that if you've learnt the blue line, you should be able to ring everything perfectly, but in real life, it doesn't work that way. You get in a muddle, you get a bit lost, you need a signpost, you need something to say, yes, I know where I am. And the fact that in Double Oxford you do a triple dodge with your core spell is really handy. Maybe you missed a dodge or something and you get there a bit earlier. Hey, I meant to be dodging with you, aren't I? Where are you? And then, you know, I think, is this my second dodge? And then you arrive and I'm dodging with you and we look at each other and I think, oh, I got there too early. Yes, we'll count out the 3 dodges. Thank you, goodbye. It's really, really good at keeping you accurate. And that's the message for today.
Right, well, thanks, David. That was really interesting. Has anybody got any comments or questions at this stage? I mean, I've got a few things that I can say, but I think it would be a good to open up to see if anybody's actually got any questions about the presentation itself or things that you want clarifying. Anybody got anything to say before I just launch into what?
Yeah.
Did somebody say they had? No?
No, I said no.
Okay. Well, I mean, this is a really interesting subject, and before the session started, David and I were talking about what he was going to say, and our own experiences really of what core spells meant to each of us respectively, and I made this sort of statement that actually core spells don't play a very big part in, well, they don't feature much in my mental processing, but actually that's not strictly true, because they probably do feature in my mental processing, but I'm actually unaware that it does. So I've picked up the patterns and I've absorbed those patterns, and that helps me to ring by knowing. So I would know that without realizing that they're my core spells, I would know that, you know, in a quite complex method like Cambridge Major, perhaps, that I'm actually dodging. I know which bells I'm going to dodge with at the back, and I know that every time I'm at the back dodging, it's going to be with those bells. But my brain's not telling me you're dodging with your core spells at the back. It's just telling me, it's told me the information, but without giving it a label. So on the point I was going to make is that I sometimes feel that when we're teaching, and I'm guilty of this as much as anybody, and I've not really seen anybody teach it sort of particularly different. I hope I'm wrong, and I'm probably am wrong, but certainly in the art syllabus, the learning the ropes syllabus, you're taught about core spells when you're learning to plane hunt. And that's when the theory part of core spells comes into the course. But they're not mentioned at all, ever, after that. And when you're learning to plane hunt, it is useful information, because they can be used as a signpost to help you lead. So you know you lead after your before bell, and your after bell leads after you. But as soon as you start ringing, the next thing you do after ringing plane hunt is actually to start ringing plane hunt on the treble to methods, isn't it? You don't go from learning plane hunt generally to learning a method inside, and there can be a very long gap. Well, rather, so when you're ringing the treble to doubles or minor, that's part of learning to plane hunt. But it can be a very long time for people between when they start learning to plane hunt on the treble to learning their first method inside. And when they start learning their first method inside, there's so much to learn, or it's so hard, it's such a big job switching to learning a method inside. So you usually generally start by learning a list of things that you've got to do, so that your list of work and circle work, learn the blue line. But when it actually comes to actually ringing it, that's enough information, and your brain probably can't process any more information than that for you to be able to ring it. And it takes quite a long time to even ring a plane course successfully, doesn't it? Because you're still trying to process that information. So actually, the next thing people usually tell you about is passing the treble, how important that is. And some people can see that straight away, and some people can't. but I'm not aware, and I'm guilty of this myself. I'm not aware of saying to people, then talking, as you learn your plain bob inside, talking to people about their course bells. And that's, and from my point of view, that's because as I've explained how I ring, personally, they don't really register with me, and that's probably quite shocking. But I am admitting that I have that information, but I don't label it, so that's a problem as a teacher. So it could, certainly teachers could do a lot more with actually talking about course bells when you get to that stage, or going back over course bells when you get to that stage of learning methods. I mean, it may, the fact that I don't label course bells in my head may be why I'm not a conductor. Okay, I can put bobs in and I can keep people right, but when I'm calling things, I'm not thinking of coursing orders and transposing coursing orders at all. So I do it by some other way, some other method that comes out of my subconscious. And so this is where sometimes ringing is really, I'm not saying it's badly taught, it's just people, a lot of assumptions are made with people. So I dare say, having outlined what, my own pathway through ringing, and the pathway that even with good teaching these days, so I hope we're giving good teaching, which I think we are, but even with that, it's very rare that I think we forget, the people who are teaching forget to go over things again. I frequently say to people, you might not see this now, certainly with passing the treble, you might not see this now. However, you probably will see it, and then a light bulb will go on, and you'll think, oh yeah, I remember Claire talking about that like 2 years ago or something like that, or 6 weeks ago, just depending on when that information becomes, you're able to process that information and when it becomes relevant to you. I mean, you'd hope that it all will become relevant to you, but there are some people who possibly it always remains just a little bit too much information, and so they just end up ringing the hard way. So without this information, I would say, so without knowing about passing the treble, without knowing or understanding the course bells things, you can ring, but you're ringing the hard way. I think is how I would sum that up. So I don't know if anybody's got any further things to say about that. I mean, there are a few people on this course who I taught to ring, and so you're probably thinking, yeah, you never did tell us about course bells, did you?
I mentioned one thing that I certainly found very useful. I don't ring this way now, but I did when I was learning, and for a long time beyond that, which is when you go on to 7 or 8 bells, in my case, it was grands and triples, and it's not that hard a method in some ways, but because it's 8 bells, even if one of them's covering, it's the rope side's much harder. I really found that difficult. And I found that if you're leading and a bell takes you off, okay, it helps to know who it's going to be, but it's not too hard to say, well, I'm ringing over you. Now, next time it'll be over you. Who is immediately after that? It'll be over you next time. So going one step further each time on the way up is not easy, but it's not too bad. It's much, much harder coming down. I don't quite know why. I mean, people do say, well, they're all the bells and you can cross off that one and it's one of the others, but I found it much harder to find out who I was ringing after. And at that stage, I relied much more on knowing I'm ringing after you. So I'll look at you and ring after you. And I found that very difficult. So I got lost plain hunting down much more often than plain hunting up. And that's where I found knowing who your before bell is in Granso, and the same would be true in plain bob major, is very, very useful. Because if I do lose my way on the way down, I would actually say, well, I know that bell over there is my before bell. I'll just keep 2 blows behind it until it leads, and then I'll go 3rd place, still 2 blows behind it, catching up 2nd place, then I'll take it off the lead. And that was where my remark about, if you're a bit wobbly, make sure that you try and have the best ringer as your before bell, because you can be absolutely sure that they'll be in the right place so you can follow them. But that's it's a fairly elementary example where I think knowing your before bell in that case is really useful. It's not sort of highfalutin theory conducting stuff. It really helps you keep in the right place when you're learning, particularly as you move on to a larger number of bells.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll pick up the first, as you started that, what you just said, you said something about the way you used to ring something, but now you ring it a bit differently. I think I recognise that in my journey through ringing, and I think, and if you sort of pay attention to your own journey through ringing, I think you'll recognise that in yourself. So, if you and this all goes back to, I don't know how many of you attended Arthur's one very early on. Arthur did a presentation about how we learn and about your working memory and about your long-term memory. And your working memory has got about, you've got about 20 seconds of short-term memory to be able to remember something. But once you've learnt it, it goes into your long-term memory, and it gets sort of like, it gets fished out of your subconscious to be able to do it. And this is how ringing develops. So I can say exactly that about some of the methods that I've run. That so you know how we go on about counting your places, etc., etc. Well, when I ring plain bob, a method like plain bob doubles now, or plain bob minor, or some of the sort of what for me are the simpler plain methods. So they're not really complex when you consider the sort of level of ringing that I've advanced to. I know that I don't even count my places anymore. I'm admitting this to you now, but that's because probably subconsciously my brain is counting them for me. I have no, I just know, I instinctively know where I am in the change and which direction I'm going. But until you've done that enough times, probably, more than 10,000 times, which is supposedly you have to repeat something 10,000 times before you've learned it, they say. But so instinctively, I know where I am in a change. And so consequently, I'm not actually using brain power to count places, and so I can use my brain for something else. And this is why when you see advanced ringers able to put themselves right, I've just admitted to you that I'm no conductor because I don't know coursing orders, and I'm not very good with numbers. So I'm quite likely to transpose a coursing order when I'm not supposed to have done, so I've remembered it in the wrong order or something like that. And so I don't work them out. I don't bother to try because I know I'm not very good at it. But I suppose if I put my mind to it, I might do that. But if I'm ringing with you and somebody goes wrong and I put you right, then you might wonder how I'm doing that. Well, it's because the rest of the method, because it's relatively simple for me, is on autopilot. So I'm not actually thinking about what I'm ringing. I'm ringing it anyway. And so what I'm thinking about is what you're ringing. And so I've picked up where you've made a mistake, and I'm able to put you right while still staying right myself. So you think you wonder how you do it, but that's how everybody does it. It's just that they know the method so well that they're not concentrating on what they're ringing. They're concentrating on it. Doesn't mean to say I won't then fall off the line and go wrong myself. So I'm absolutely not perfect. But if you've ever wondered how people do it, that's what's going on in their head.
It's a bit like our Tuesday practice, because like the guys who've they've been doing it in the tower for so long that they know what to look for and who to look at, and then ringing room has thrown them a bit. And I've found that the guys who are more experienced than myself and others are then having to count.
Absolutely, you're absolutely. Yeah, we're all struggling with ringing room, I can tell you.
Yeah, but like Phil has probably been ringing for about 40 odd years, or maybe longer. On our Tuesday practice, he's there counting, and I'm trying to keep count of my place as well.
Well, I mean, it's sort of how you do it. You're subconsciously counting, but ringing room is different from being in the tower. And I certainly know that my sort of ringing something like plain bob doubles, like the way that I rang it when I first started would have been to learn the line or learn the order of work, learn the line, learn what happens at bobs, and then what you do next, rather than play spells, as David said. Very few people learn their first method by play spells.
David, my pad, you can't really see it. I've got all the lines on it.
And as David says, it doesn't particularly matter with your first method about learning play spells, but knowing about them is useful. So it doesn't mean to say you don't have to learn. Well, it's not important to be absolutely to learn it by play spells. However, knowing about them is good. Likewise, knowing about where you pass the treble is good. But you may not be able to. So I went from knowing the line to play mob doubles to ringing it. Probably ringing it by counting places, and then I know that I switched from ringing it by counting places to ringing it by the treble. So not bothering. I'm still not really bothering about play spells because for me it's quite a simple method, and but I make notes of things like its place, so I can hear the treble leading. So not everybody can do that, but or that's a skill that should be developed. So I hear the treble leading and I think, oh, where am I at this back stroke? Oh, I'm in fourth place. That means I'm fourth place belt. That would be my thought process. I don't consciously think that, but that's what my brain is doing without me even knowing it.
Yeah, that's what Emma was saying to our tower captain. He said, all these years I've been trying to follow the line. He says, and it's easy, just got to know where the lead is.
But also ringing by where you pass the treble, so you know that if you've forgotten what play spell you are, or you don't even know, you know you're going out towards the back, and it's most important when you're going towards the back. So where you pass the treble on the way down from the back is much less important than where you pass it on the way up from the back, because when you're going up to the back, that tells you what your work's going to be. Where you pass the treble after you've come down from the back, actually, if it was important, it would tell you what you've just done. But we have to move forward in ringing. We never reflect back. That's the thing. Ringing is definitely a forward-moving thing, and there's virtually no place there is no place in ringing for reflecting on what you've done while you're ringing.
I think the point about counting is interesting. I think a lot of people do count in their head subconsciously. And if you look around in the tower, not in ringing room so much, but if you look around in the tower, everything's going well and people are ringing quite nicely. And then someone goes a bit wrong and gets a bit jumbled, and you'll find people are now ringing. They're counting to themselves. And I think, I don't know if Claire agrees, but I think a lot of people, when they're ringing 10 and 12 bells, they won't count, but you'll see them sort of going. There's some sort of head movement or lip movement that's actually counting where the bells ought to be, even if someone's late. They're sort of counting the numbers without actually saying them.
I know, and whilst I don't count places on 6-bell methods or not universally, if I know a method well on 6 or 8, I probably don't count my places at all. I definitely count my places on 10 or 12 because that's where that's harder for me. I'm not at a stage where I'm as good at 10 and 12 bell ringing as I am at 6 and 8. So yes, if I were to be ever get better, I'll know I've got better at 10 and 12 if I stop counting places, but that's not happened yet. So I don't know if I know I've talked quite a lot, and David's talked quite a lot. If anybody wants to say something, we're just about at we're up to the hour now, so it's time to end the meeting. So. But unless anybody's got something they would like to say.
No.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
No, it's great. Great. Thank you very much.
Also, definitely thank you again, David. Thanks very much for the presentations you've given over the last few weeks or so. I mean, you've come in. It's about 4 times now, isn't it? 4, 5 times now.
Yeah, 4, I think. Yeah.
And they've been great. As I was saying to David.